What if everything you've been taught about love is backwards? Picture this. You're watching your most confident friend, the one who walks into a room and effortlessly draws people in. They're not loud, they're not chasing attention, but somehow everyone's intrigued by them, pulled in almost magnetically. Meanwhile, you're sitting there overanalyzing every message, second-guessing your silence, constantly being the one to reach out, only to get dry, half-hearted replies in return. Yeah, it feels unfair, doesn't it? But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us were raised to believe that love is something we earn through effort, that the more available we are, the more we show we care, the more someone will want us. But that mindset, it doesn't build connection, it burns you out, it hands your power away. Now, what if I told you that real attraction, real respect, and real connection, they begin the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop proving and start embodying something much older and much deeper: Stoic stillness. The Stoics believe that true influence doesn't come from how loud you are, it comes from inner strength, and when it comes to relationships, that couldn't be more accurate. You don't need to beg to be chosen. You need to become the kind of presence that doesn't demand attention, it just naturally commands it. That's what this is about. How to flip the script and let people start chasing you, not because you're playing games, but because of how you show up, for yourself. If this already feels like something you've been needing, then here's one simple thing I'll ask. Hit that subscribe button. It's the easiest way to let me know we're on the same path, building something powerful, grounded, and solid from the inside out. Let's dive in.
Let's be real for a second. Most of us have been taught that love equals effort, that it's about texting first, keeping the spark alive by always doing more. On the surface, that sounds noble, thoughtful even, but in practice, it's exhausting. Here's what no one tells you. When you're always the one reaching out, you're sending an invisible signal: I need this more than you do. And just like that, the energy shifts. You go from being someone they feel lucky to talk to someone who's just always available. And deep down, we don't chase what we already have. We chase what's just out of reach. Now, I'm not saying you need to play games. Stoicism isn't about manipulation. It's not about pretending to be distant just to stir interest. No, the Stoics taught something deeper: self-restraint, the ability to act from wisdom, not impulse. Epictetus once said, "No person is free who is not master of themselves." So, before you send that next message just to feel noticed, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this to connect or just to soothe my anxiety? See, attraction isn't built through constant communication, it's built through emotional contrast. When you go silent for a bit, people start to wonder. They wonder what you're doing, who you're with, what you're thinking. That gentle absence, it creates a vacuum, and attention rushes in to fill it. Not because you're being manipulative, but because you've stepped out of the spotlight and let curiosity walk in. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." Sometimes, always texting first isn't about being caring, it's about avoiding silence. Because silence forces you to sit with yourself, with your doubts, your insecurities, and that's uncomfortable. But here's the secret. When you learn to be comfortable in that silence, when you stop trying to fill every gap with noise, you gain something far more powerful than connection. You gain clarity. And here's another truth. When you're always the one initiating, you don't leave space for the other person to invest. You're robbing them of the opportunity to choose you. You're rushing the story instead of letting it unfold. Think about it. How can someone chase you if you never stop running toward them? Plato said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self."
That includes the urge to control how connection unfolds. So here's a small challenge. If you're always the one texting first, just stop. Not forever, not in a cold, passive-aggressive way. Just take 3 days. 3 days of stillness, no initiation, not to punish anyone, but to observe. Who notices your silence? Who fills the space? Who steps up when you step back? Because here's what's deeper. When you stop rushing to be seen, you start to see who's actually looking. When you stop speaking just to feel heard, you learn who listens when you're quiet. And when you stop chasing, you make space for someone to decide if they truly want to follow. This kind of restraint, it's not passive, it's strength. Socrates said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." And every time you resist the pull to over-text, over-give, or over-explain, you get a little closer to that wisdom. You become someone whose attention isn't a given, it's a gift. Most people don't even realize how much they give away in the first few conversations. We're so eager to connect, to prove we're interesting, that we overshare. Hobbies, opinions, relationship history, everything. And fast. But here's the twist. When you give someone your whole story up front, they stop reading. There's no suspense, no mystery, no tension. You become familiar too quickly. And as the Stoics would say, familiarity breeds indifference. They believed in measured expression, not because they feared vulnerability, but because they valued depth. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That's not just good advice for life, it's magnetic for attraction. Because when you say less, you give others space to lean in, to wonder, to imagine. And that is where the spark lives. Psychology backs this up too. Carl Jung wrote, "The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But transformation doesn't happen when everything's predictable. It happens when there's mystery, when there's tension, when there's space for emotion to build. Let's bring this down to earth. The next time someone asks, "So, what do you do for fun?" don't list 5 activities in bullet points. Try this instead. Depends on the mood. Sometimes I disappear for days. Other times I throw the best dinner party you've ever seen. See the difference? You're not being vague. You're creating curiosity, a little spark. Now they're not just listening, they're wondering. Aristotle once said, "The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance." And conversation, it's an art. You don't need to showcase every part of yourself all at once. You don't need to pour out your entire story in one sitting. Instead, share just enough to stir interest. Let your presence unfold in layers, like a book you don't want to put down. Chapter by chapter, a little at a time. And no, this doesn't mean hiding who you are. Vulnerability is beautiful when it's earned, when it's shared with intention, when it builds slowly, like a slow burn in a good story. What you're doing is creating emotional pacing. You're giving someone space to catch up, to want more, to invest. Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." That same energy, that sense of curiosity and openness is what makes people lean in. There's always something new, a new layer, a mystery just out of reach. But when you lay everything out on the table too soon, their brain stops reaching. There's no spark, no chase, and you become another predictable voice in a world that's already too loud. You don't need to try to be mysterious. You just have to stop over-explaining, Let silence sit a little longer before you answer. Let someone ask the same question twice. That's a sign it's working. Because people don't chase what's obvious. They chase what makes them wonder. So slow down. Speak with weight. Don't fill in every blank. Let them want to know. This isn't game playing. This is wisdom. This is restraint. This is power. And the people who master this, they don't beg for attention. They receive it. Here's the lie so many of us have believed, that being constantly available makes us valuable. That if we always show up, if we always reply instantly, if we're always on whenever someone reaches out, that they'll see it as loyalty, as love, as effort. But what actually happens? It backfires. Quietly, slowly, over time. Your presence stops feeling special, your time starts to feel cheap, and your energy, something sacred, starts being taken for granted. It's the law of supply and demand. If something is always there, people start treating it like it's ordinary, familiar, forgettable. And, as every Stoic understood, familiarity dulls appreciation. Marcus Aurelius once said, "We love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinions than our own." Think about that. If you're always putting other people's urgency ahead of your own peace, if you drop everything every time they call, are you really being generous, or are you abandoning yourself? Let's go deeper. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can you become anything at all if you're always on standby for someone else? If you're always available for their convenience? When are you actually available? For you? That's not kindness. That's overexposure. Don't confuse being kind with being on call. Boundaries aren't walls. They're standards. When you stop responding immediately to every message, you're not being rude. You're teaching people something important. Your energy is valuable. Your focus is earned. And people feel that shift. They might not say it, but they'll notice it. They'll respect it, because deep down, we all value what feels rare. Aristotle believed in balance, in living life with purpose, not chaos. He said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Knowing yourself means knowing where your time goes. It means your life doesn't go on pause just because someone else suddenly remembered you exist. If you want people to value your time, start by valuing it yourself. Let's talk practical. This week, try saying no just once. Not to be difficult, but to protect your peace. Let a message sit for an hour, not because you're ignoring them, but because you're finishing your thoughts, your tasks, your space. If someone wants to talk and you're mid-focus, finish your task first. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. Your presence is not a product on a shelf. It's not always in stock. And the moment people realize that, they start treating it with care. Plato once said, "The good life is one of order, purpose, and harmony, not urgency, not people-pleasing, not being pulled in 10 directions just because someone else is bored." When you move from a grounded place, when your energy is aligned with your intentions, people feel it. And that's what draws them in. Not your availability, your alignment. Set the tone, slow the pace. Show up when you decide to, not when you're summoned. Because availability doesn't equal value, but self-respect, that always does. Now let's get real. There's this feeling that hits hard when you care deeply about someone. Every part of you wants to be close. You want to stay in their orbit, stay on their mind. So you text, you check their stories, you respond the moment they type. You show up again and again. Not because you're needy, but because you're afraid of being forgotten. But here's the paradox. The more you try to stay close, the more the connection starts to fade. Why? Because too much presence smothers curiosity. When there's no space, there's no contrast. When there's no contrast, there's no spark. Even the brightest fire dies when there's no oxygen. And that's exactly what constant contact does. It takes all the air out of the room. The Stoics understood this on a soul-deep level. They practiced emotional detachment, not to be cold, but to stay in control. Epictetus said, "He who is not satisfied with a little is satisfied with nothing." If you can't sit with a little distance, no amount of closeness will ever feel safe. True connection isn't about always being there. It's about being felt, even when you're not. Carl Jung spoke about separation being a part of growth. He said, "Loneliness doesn't come from having no people around. It comes from being unable to communicate the things that seem important. And sometimes the most important thing you can say isn't a word. It's an absence." When you step back, you give people the chance to feel your presence, not through words, not through effort, but through stillness. Plato taught that everything meaningful goes through 3 stages: formation, contrast, transformation. That includes people. Constant updates and check-ins don't give anything time to form. They kill the natural rhythm. If someone never gets the chance to wonder where you are, what you're thinking, or why you've gone quiet, they never get the chance to miss you. And this isn't about playing games. It's about restoring balance. When one person is always showing up while the other drifts in and out, that's not romance. That's an emotional imbalance. And imbalance? It doesn't create spark. It creates weight. The goal isn't to punish anyone with silence. It's to let desire breathe again, to let longing come up for air. Socrates believed that self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom, and part of self-awareness, it's knowing the difference between reaching out from a grounded place and reaching out from anxiety. When you text just to get a response, when you show up online just to feel close, that's not presence, that's pursuit. And when you're always the one in pursuit, there's no space for them to take a step forward. You've already filled the space. So here's the shift. Resist the urge. Not forever. Not from a place of pride or punishment, just enough to let silence do what words cannot. Let your absence speak. Let the stillness create value. Because the people who are meant to be close, they'll feel the gap. They'll notice your silence. They'll want to close the distance themselves. That's when the energy flips. That's when attraction reawakens, not through pressure, but through space, through peace, through self-respect. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to be constantly present to be unforgettable. You just need to stop chasing and start allowing. Let them feel the silence. Let it say what your words never could. There's something magnetic about unpredictability. Think about it. The people who stick in your mind, the ones who leave a mark long after they're gone, they all have one thing in common. They're a little unexpected. Not in a chaotic way, but in a human, dynamic, emotionally alive kind of way. They don't always move in straight lines. They don't always say what you expect. And that unpredictability, it lingers. It makes you wonder. See, the human brain craves patterns, but it also gets bored by them. Predictability makes us feel safe, but too much safety? It becomes monotony. If someone always texts at the same time, always reacts the same way, always uses the same tone, you stop wondering what they'll say next. And when the wondering stops, so does the excitement, so does the chase. The Stoics got this. While they believed in emotional stability, they never confused it with emotional flatness. Marcus Aurelius said, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." Change, that's the key word. To live well, to connect deeply, to stay compelling. You need movement. You need a little flux. You need the unknown. Not chaos, but color. And when you bring that into how you communicate, how you show up, everything shifts. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But when you finally do, when you stop filtering parts of yourself just to make others comfortable, you stop being predictable. You stop shrinking. You stop editing your tone, your timing, your quirks. You allow yourself to show the full range of who you are. Your quiet moments, your bold ideas, your humor, your depth, and that variation, it wakes people up. Let's talk energy. Energy is contagious. When you're fully alive, when your words have rhythm, when your presence has flow, people feel that. They don't always know why they're drawn to you, but they are. Because you bring something most people are missing. Contrast, depth, unpredictability. Most people walk around half asleep, stuck in routine, drowning in small talk. When you interrupt that rhythm with something real, something a little off pattern, it's like striking a chord they didn't know they needed. Aristotle once said, "Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work." That applies to relationships too. When you bring joy, curiosity, and a dash of the unexpected to how you connect with others, even the smallest moment feels alive. A message with a new tone, a playful reply when they expected something serious, a pause when they expected a rush, these little shifts, they spark curiosity. So, here's what you can do right now. Break your rhythm. If you usually reply in seconds, wait an hour. If you always say good night, try switching it up with something random or poetic. Be soft one day, direct the next. Be reflective, then spontaneous. Let people experience the range of you, not just the highlight reel, because real attraction doesn't come from perfection. It comes from realness, from depth, from the parts of you that can't be neatly predicted or replicated. Plato said that love is born from the desire to find something beyond ourselves, something meaningful, something that awakens us. But if you always act in ways people can map out from day one, where's the discovery? And discovery is where emotion lives. So try this. Do one thing this week that surprises someone. Doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe you call instead of texting. Maybe you bring up a thought you've never shared. Maybe you send silence instead of over-explaining. Let them feel a shift. Let them feel the spark. Not because you're performing, but because you're not afraid to show who you really are. Stoicism isn't about being robotic. It's about being intentional. That includes knowing when to switch things up, when to shift the tempo, when to let mystery walk into the room. When you bring that kind of awareness into your presence, people don't know what to expect from you. And that is exactly why they keep coming back. Let's explore something subtler now. Compliments. There's quiet power in saying less, especially when it comes to praise. We've been taught that complimenting people is always a good thing. And sometimes it is. But only when it's real, only when it's rare, only when it's rooted in presence. The problem isn't that people like compliments, it's that most compliments have become cheap, automatic, expected. When praise is handed out like candy, early, often, without intention, it stops meaning anything. What started as warmth starts to feel like approval seeking. And that's when the dynamic changes. People may not consciously know why, but they feel it. When you compliment someone before they've earned your trust, when you offer praise just to be liked, it sends a signal. You're trying to win them over. Here's the truth. What's earned is respected. What's given too easily is dismissed, so compliments aren't bad. But when they're used carelessly, they lose all impact and often lower your perceived value. The Stoics taught restraint, not just in action, but in expression. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." In the same way, don't waste words trying to impress someone with flattery. Be someone who notices, who pays attention, who only speaks praise when it's felt, when it's true. And when you do, it lands, because it's rare, because it's real. Carl Jung had a similar view on authenticity. You are what you do, not what you say you'll do. Same with connection. It's not about saying 100 nice things. It's about saying one thing that feels earned, grounded, honest. A compliment that actually carries emotional weight echoes louder than a dozen generic ones meant to keep someone interested.
And here's where it gets really interesting. In a world where people are quick to flatter, where compliments fly without thought, where validation is practically on tap, your silence becomes a signal. When someone's used to being praised by everyone around them, and you don't jump in right away, it does something. It creates tension, mystery. They start to wonder, why hasn't this person said anything? That pause, that space, that quiet absence of approval. It's magnetic. It creates an emotional contrast that most people don't even realize they're craving. Socrates said, "True wisdom begins with knowing how little you know." And that applies here too. When you observe more and speak less, especially in those early stages, you're signaling something deeper, that you're not easily impressed, that your attention has weight, that your words mean something when you finally offer them. And no, this doesn't mean withholding affection or being emotionally closed off. Not at all. It means being intentional. Wait until the moment feels right. Wait until it lands. Then speak. Speak with purpose, with clarity, without exaggeration. One well-timed compliment about someone's presence, thoughtfulness, the way they carry themselves, will echo longer than a dozen "you're so cute" messages ever could. Plato once said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." That includes compliments. Let your praise come from stillness, from attention, from truth. Those are the compliments people replay in their heads for days because they didn't feel like strategy. They felt like recognition. So here's your challenge. The next time you feel the urge to say something generic, pause. Observe instead. Let them feel your attention before they hear it. And when the right moment comes, say something that hits with weight. That's the kind of compliment people chase. Not because it flatters their ego, but because it felt real. And real is rare. Let's go deeper now. Some of the most powerful moments in life, they happen in silence, not in the noise, not in the over-explanations, but in that still space between words, where something deeper settles in. That's where connection begins, where presence speaks louder than anything you could say. But here's the catch. Most people can't sit with silence. It makes them anxious. It feels like a void, like something that needs to be filled. So they ramble, they rush, they reply too fast, not because they're confident, but because they're uncomfortable. Because stillness, it can feel like a spotlight. It forces you to be seen, not for what you say, but for who you are. But here's the twist. Discomfort isn't the enemy.
In fact, it's often the doorway to something real. The Stoics practiced restraint, not just in emotion, but in expression. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That includes silence. When someone goes quiet, or when a conversation hits a lull, do you panic? Or do you breathe and let the moment unfold? Carl Jung once wrote, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." Silence, both inward and outward, allows clarity to rise, and clarity is what builds connection. When you resist the need to fill every gap, when you can sit in the quiet without scrambling to perform, you send a powerful message. I am at ease with myself.
And that, more than any clever line or fast reply, creates magnetism. Socrates, the father of questions, believed that wisdom begins in wonder. And wonder? It doesn't grow in a monologue. It grows in pause, in the gaps, in letting a question hang just a second longer than usual. That delay, that breath, it invites curiosity, it stirs reflection, and reflection is where real connection lives. Let's talk rhythm. In music, it's not just the notes that move us, it's the space between them. The silence is what gives melody its shape. And conversation is the same. If you're always speaking, always explaining, always rushing to respond, there's no space for the other person to feel your words. But when you pause, even just for a beat, something shifts. They lean in, they listen, they wonder. And that leaning in is where attraction begins. Aristotle said, "The more you know, the more you realize you don't know." And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is hold back. Say less. Trust your presence. Let your calm do the talking. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to follow every message with a follow-up. Let the conversation breathe. Let your energy settle into the room. If someone's curious about you, they'll come forward. If they're not, no amount of filler will change that. Here's the truth. Silence isn't emptiness, it's invitation. It's mystery. It's the space where emotional gravity is born. And in a world that's constantly rushing to respond, the person who can pause, the person who can wait, they instantly stand out. That stillness becomes a signal, a magnetic pull, not because you're trying to impress, but because you're centered. So next time you're in a conversation, try this. Resist the reflex. Let the silence stretch. Let the message sit before you reply. Let the question linger before you answer. Let your presence speak without noise. Because when you master the pause, you don't just speak, you resonate. Let's explore one final layer in this section, the energy behind your presence. There's something people pick up on instantly, and it's not what you say, it's not even what you do, it's what you radiate. Not the loud, look at me kind of energy, but the deeper, quieter kind. The kind that says, I know my worth. I don't need to chase. I'm already enough. And here's the thing, this kind of energy can't be faked. It only comes when you've done the work, when you've stopped needing attention just to feel secure, when you've started choosing peace over approval. You don't need to walk around announcing your value. People can feel it when you enter the room. The Stoics called this self-sufficiency. Seneca said, "He who is content is rich." When you already feel whole, when your sense of self doesn't hinge on being liked, no one can control you with attention. No one can bait you with approval. You're not begging for love. You're choosing who deserves access to your peace. That is real power. And people feel that power, whether they realize it or not. They can sense when you're not performing,
when you're not editing yourself to fit someone else's comfort, when you're not trying to impress, not trying to be chosen, not shrinking to seem likable. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But here's the magic. When you do, when you finally accept yourself fully and honestly, you stop needing validation just to feel secure. You stop overcompensating. You stop pretending to be low maintenance, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, agreeing with things you don't believe, just to keep someone around. You stop editing your edges. You become anchored. And when you're anchored in who you are, you move differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself like someone with options, not because you're bluffing, but because you genuinely feel free. That freedom? It's magnetic. Ever notice how much more relaxed, more playful, more you become when you're not emotionally attached to the outcome? That version of you, the grounded one, the one not waiting on approval, that's the version people chase, because it feels alive. But when you treat one person like they're your only chance at love, connection, or worthiness, it starts to show. Even if your words are polished, even if you're saying all the right things, the energy behind your actions says otherwise. You try too hard, you overcompliment, you filter your real opinions, you bend your personality to keep them comfortable. And little by little, without even realizing it, you lose alignment with yourself. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And in relationships, emotional power is everything. The power to walk away, the power to choose silence, the power to stand still instead of chasing. That's what creates presence. That's what builds respect. Here's a self-check. The next time you're with someone you're interested in, ask yourself, am I being real? Or am I performing? If your tone is laced with nervous energy, if your words are built to impress instead of express, pause, breathe, recenter. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. The right people will recognize it without the pitch. Socrates said, "To find yourself, think for yourself." So stop shrinking to fit someone else's story. Start writing your own. Make choices from your values, not from your fear of being alone. Because when your presence comes from peace, not pressure, people feel safer around you. They feel intrigued. They feel drawn in. And in that space, you don't have to chase anyone. They come to you, not because you said you had options, but because you carried yourself like someone who already knew it. There's a moment, a shift in tone, a delayed reply, a rhythm that feels off, and your gut picks it up before your mind has words for it. Something feels different. The warmth starts to cool, the presence fades, and suddenly, you feel that old urge rise up, that urge to reach, to fix, to fight for your place in someone's life. You want to explain, to clarify, to prove you're worth staying for. But what if, instead of clinging, you let go first? Not out of spite, not to play games, but from stillness, from the kind of clarity that says, my worth doesn't need defending. My value doesn't need an audience. The Stoics were masters of this. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and it is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. You can't control how someone feels. You can't force connection. But what you can control is your response, and choosing to walk away with your peace intact, that's the highest form of self-respect." Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." You are not the unanswered message. You are not the silence on the other end. You are not the shrinking version of yourself who's afraid to let go. You are your boundaries. You are your decisions. You are the person who's willing to leave the room when your presence isn't being respected. Plato taught that love is the pursuit of wholeness. But if love starts to feel like a one-way street, like imbalance, like effort without return, that's not love. That's misalignment. And staying too long in imbalance? It teaches your nervous system to settle for crumbs, and what you tolerate, you train yourself to expect. So maybe the most powerful thing you can do isn't to explain, it's to leave. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, softly, with grace. You pull your energy back. You stop chasing conversations. You stop trying to be chosen. And instead, you choose yourself. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." That includes your emotional patterns. Ask yourself, am I staying in situations that chip away at my dignity? Am I overgiving out of love or out of fear? Am I showing up grounded, or am I hoping someone else will give me a reason to feel worthy today? These questions are hard, but they lead to freedom. Because when you leave first, not from anger, but from inner calm, something powerful happens. You're not running, you're not avoiding, you're honoring what's true. That what once felt aligned no longer is. And rather than distort yourself to fit what's changing, you walk away. You protect your peace. And that walk, that graceful exit, it echoes louder than any message ever could. Aristotle said that true happiness comes from living a life of virtue and self-realization. And that means choosing the hard road when it aligns with your truth. That means saying, "This isn't for me," even when your heart aches. Because peace isn't always found in fixing. Sometimes it's found in walking away. So if the energy is off, trust it. Don't write another paragraph explaining yourself. Don't send another message trying to revive something that's already slipping. Just pull your energy back, softly, firmly, completely, because the person who walks away with grace, they don't just protect their dignity, they become unforgettable. Sometimes silence says everything. Let's be real. There's something unmistakable about someone who doesn't need the room to like them in order to feel whole. They're not performing, they're not trying, they're just anchored. And people lean in. That kind of quiet confidence, you can't fake it. It comes from building something solid on the inside. It's calm, it's grounded, it's self-assured, not loud, not arrogant, just real. And that is what people remember. So build your life like it's already enough. Fill your days with what feeds your soul. Become someone who adds value to themselves first. Because when you do that, you stop chasing the people who don't see you, and you start attracting the ones who do. Not because you needed them, but because you finally stopped needing anyone. And in that space of wholeness, that's where everything begins. True power starts the moment you stop chasing and start becoming. If this message stirred something in you, there's another video on your screen right now that will take you deeper. Keep watching, keep reflecting, keep growing. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, stay calm, stay clear, and keep becoming someone even silence can't ignore.